A wild trade is incoming for the Toronto Maple Leafs, as it is no secret that the Leafs need to make a move in order to make room for Max Pacioretty, and a new report is dropped revealing which player the Leafs are currently shopping. So to break down that report and discuss what it can mean going forward as opening night is inching closer and closer. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we do, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, about 70% of you, we're very close to 13,000 subscribers. So make sure to hit that subscribe button if you are a part of that percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel and you like daily Leafs content. But Darius, obviously, Max Pacioretty has been the big storyline over the past little bit, specifically regarding how the Leafs are going to make room in the form of a trade to make room, obviously, for Max Pacioretty to make the team. And we finally have some insight on what that move could be. And we got a report, and it's not the player that a lot of you fans out there are thinking. And that guy that you're probably thinking is David Kampf. It is not him. It is Calle Jarnkrok. So according to a report by David Painata, he is in play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And let's dive right into the report here. So obviously the Leafs are currently over the salary cap by about $1 million according to Puckpedia, and GM Brad Treliving is evaluating his options both in the trade front and long-term IR options to start the season. And as previously reported, the Leafs have made forward Nick Robertson and defenseman Connor Timmins available for trade. And it's not a secret that obviously they're still shopping these guys. Nick Robertson, I think at this point, is pretty safe. He signed the contract. He's playing very well, and he figures to factor in heavily. But Calle Jarnkrok, who is currently day-to-day with an injury, which we'll discuss in a minute, he is set to earn $2.2 million in actual salary, and a move is not imminent, though some teams in need of a versatile bottom six forward may pursue Jarnkrok, who can play both the center and the wing. So basically, they're shopping Robertson, Timmins, and Calle Jarnkrok. But Calle Jarnkrok is the guy that we haven't discussed too much on the channel. I think, and we'll get into this in a little bit, David Kampf is the safer option to trade, but it seems like they're actively shopping Cal.
Yeah, I think like you brought up, Kampf is probably the odd man out for me personally, just because I think they have a guy like Holmberg that can come in and play the same role for far less. And Kampf makes way too much money for what he does, I think, at this point in time. And I'm a little bit surprised to see that it is Jarnkrok that could be the odd man out, at least in terms of, the front runner out of 3 or 4 guys. But at the end of the day, I mean, I talked about it in a video that we did previously, maybe a couple weeks ago, that the Leafs have too many floaters, and they've had too many floaters the last couple of years. And what I mean by that is guys, I call them floaters at least, guys who are pretty good at a lot of things, but not great at one specific thing. And I feel like Craig Berube is very heavy on purpose and character, obviously character, but each line having an identity. And I feel like Jarnkrok doesn't really lend to that at all right now, at least with the current makeup of the team. They just kind of throw him in a place. It's not because he should be there. It's just because he's on the team right now. He's on the roster. So he's a guy that definitely fits into that category for me. So, he could be the odd man out. I'm a little bit shocked because of how much he makes that he is the guy. I would think that it could be, David Kampf instead. A lot of people are talking about Ryan Reeves. Ryan Reeves is not going anywhere. I think that's pretty clear from management that he will be on the team, maybe not play every game, but he'll be there. Connor Timmins could be, someone too, but they're going to have to free up enough space right now to sign somebody as well. Like when I say somebody, obviously Max Pacioretty, we don't know how much exactly he's going to make against the cap. So they're going to have to get rid of somebody here for sure. And obviously I think the more cap that they carry, the better. But it looks like, Jarnkrok could actually get a lot of value back. So maybe that's why he's the odd man out as well.
And obviously David Kampf's making, when he signed that 4-year, $9-point-something million contract, he's making about $2.4 million a year. And you mentioned it, Pontus Holmberg is doing the exact same thing that he can do. So that's why we both think that David Kampf would be the better guy to trade at this point. But if not, the flip side of this is that you can probably get much better value out of Calle Jarnkrok than you could David Kampf because of the contract situation. And Jarnkrok is set to earn $2.2 million in actual salary this season. So when you're thinking about teams that he could get traded to, Darius, I don't know if you have any on the top of your head. It's yet to get to the point where there's a lot of reports where there's a lot of teams out there that are shopping for depth forwards, and the Leafs obviously have a ton of guys in that. You talk about David Kampf, you talk about Pontus Holmberg, you talk about even Alex Steeves and a bunch of guys coming up. So I do think that the Leafs could get some decent value out of here. We've heard in the past teams like the Penguins, obviously the Kyle Dubas connection with Jarnkrok, teams like the Sabres that are looking for some more depth. So there are teams out there that are linked in the past to Calle Jarnkrok. I think a lot of teams, if he is shopped, would come knocking on the door, given his cap hit, the production that he has, and I think he would be a very valuable asset to a lot of teams who are either looking to compete or just get some more depth in their team.
Yeah, I don't know how much the Chicago Blackhawks want all their young guys to play this year too, but he could be another option, like another veteran guy to come in and help that team as well. You brought up the Pittsburgh Penguins. I don't know how much Kyle Dubas wants to trade with the Toronto Maple Leafs at this point. But the Maple Leafs are not going to get like another player back. It's going to be some type of asset, like a draft pick or something. They don't want any salary in return in a move like this. Like whatever they're dumping out right now before the season, they can't take anything back in. So unless it's multiple players, which we were speculating about near the end of the offseason as well. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch because there's a lot of teams who could use a guy like Jarnkrok on their, however their team is made up. So I think he's going to garner more interest around the league than a guy like maybe Robertson, who's a little less unproven with what he can do, and maybe David Camp because he makes so much at 2.4 million. So maybe he is the odd man out for that reason specifically because he can help a lot of teams. I just don't know where he fits in specifically with the Maple Leafs at this point. Like I brought up, Berube really values identity in each line, and I feel like so far through preseason with where he's played or when he's played, it's the same kind of thing that we've been seeing the last couple of years since he became a Toronto Maple Leafs. It's just kind of like he's thrown in wherever they need a body to go, right? He doesn't really have an identity on this team per se. So it's going to be interesting to watch. A lot of teams could use him.
Yeah, and obviously I trust Brad Treliving at this point. He's showed some very, in a brief tenure as a Toronto Maple Leafs GM, he's done some very good things. So if they decide to trade Calle Jarnkrok, I'll trust the fact that they either weren't getting enough value out of Nick Robertson or David Kampf, and that the value they get back for Jarnkrok is going to be better than any of the other moves they could have made. I mean, at this point, they have to make some sort of move. Max Pacioretty, in all likelihood, is going to make the team. He's definitely proven that, and you can see this here. This is kind of the sentiment of a lot of fans out there. And we've been seeing this a lot. To anyone watching the game, it should be abundantly clear that the player to get rid of is easily David Kampf if it's not Calle Jarnkrok. So it's between these two guys. I think at this point, Nick Robertson is safe. David Kampf, I mean, I suspect we've been thinking all along that he's going to be the guy to get traded, and Jarnkrok's name hasn't been brought up, and it's very interesting now. It almost makes more sense now that it's been reported. Obviously, you mentioned it. I think David Kampf is the easier guy, but you're talking about value and potentially getting value back, which is something that Brad Treliving certainly wants, whether it's third round pick, fourth round pick, whatever the pick ends up being, or whatever compensation they get to not hinder their cap situation. Jarnkrok is probably a bit easier to get that done, especially because they've obviously been shopping David Kampf now for months, or really for the past month at the very least, ever since they knew they were going to sign Max Pacioretty. And I would argue they've been trying to trade David Kampf all offseason to open up some cap space, because it's been no secret they want to do that. Clearly, the value either isn't there or the Leafs are overvaluing him. And if they are overvaluing him, they need to get a move done. And I think Jarnkrok could be the option, even though, again, he is dealing with an injury at this point. I don't think this would hinder his value by any means. He should be good, but just something to note as well. So a lot of moving pieces as we're inching closer and closer, about a week and a half away from opening night, which sounds crazy to say.
Yeah, finally, it's almost here, right? But with opening night coming, that means the Leafs have to make a decision very shortly here. It's coming within the next week. And, I thought a lot about, certain players, if they're out, like where do the players who are going to replace them fit in, right? Holmberg, I think, is so versatile on this team. I'm a big fan of Pontus Holmberg, and I feel like he can fit in on the third line. If they do keep David Kampf, who's going to play on the fourth line, he could take David Kamp's spot at center. Very versatile player. I see him fitting in those two spots. So they have options if they want to move off David Kampf and Calle Jarnkrok. Like that's a guy who can kind of fit into that position as well if need be. So I like Steven Lorentz too. We're going to have a separate video on that. I really like Steven Lorentz. Does he earn a job and earn a contract here? That's going to be interesting too, because with Pacioretty coming in and Lorentz, you're going to have to shed even more money. So maybe Timmins could be on the way out too. So it's going to be very interesting to see. There's still a lot of runway left with this preseason. They're going to give, a lot of guys a fair shake and see what they have in these games. And depending on the results of, not the results of the game, but the results of the players and how they play in those games, we will have our answer very shortly, I think.
Yeah, and we're going to keep you up to date with all the latest, because news keeps dropping every single hour, it seems like. But again, we'll keep you up to date, so make sure to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.